in the context of this conversation, Soundgarden got us into thinking, okay, Soundgarden is a very weird band.
It is
in many regards.
A band that I don't think in this day and age would become as popular as they did back in the day.
Exactly, but why?
Yeah, that's a big question. Because, for example, I actually recorded, totally not shamefully plugging the efforts for this week. I recorded my own version, our cover version of Black Hole Sun. It's going to be released tomorrow. We'll be releasing everything. Today is the first day of the week, where we're going to be tackling this whole Soundgarden stuff. And when I was recording that track and trying to dissect and find the different techniques required for the song to sound as close as possible to the original, I realized that, damn, the track's a mess.
Yeah.
It's a huge mess, a beautiful mess, mind you. It's one of my favorite songs ever, but I never stopped to truly think or reflect on how weird the track is in reality, because it has odd time signatures, and yes, it does have odd time signatures. It has a 4/4s to 4/5s during the instrumental. Nah, if you cannot detect that one, well, you guys have phones, but that's the first thing.
Yeah.
Harmonically speaking, it's all effed up.
Yeah, it's all over the place.
Yeah, the vocals are weird.
To say the least.
To say the least, plenty of layers. That's actually where I spent most of my time trying to figure out how to get it close, because I even think that I didn't manage to, it's as close as I could, because I have no means to know exactly what they did. To my ears, it sounded like that, and that shows us how much probably our culture has changed. Because when I was reacting and analyzing the track on the analysis channel, I realized I mentioned several times that something happened, culturally speaking, that allowed for a song such as that one to become the hit it is. That wouldn't happen today.
No way.
What do you think happened?
I think it's a very complex issue, because we're talking about people's acceptance to something that is not conventional. And Black Hole Sun, for example, was not only a successful song, it was a hit.
Yeah.
It played in the radio, it was a proper hit.
Yes.
And we already mentioned some of the unusual aspects of it. And I think something like that simply wouldn't fly nowadays, because people wouldn't give it the time of day. And why people wouldn't give the time of day to something that is a little bit unconventional, because it's not super obscure, it's not something extremely out there.
No.
But it is weird enough for it not to be conventional.
It's not mainstream.
It's not mainstream.
But somehow it was. Yeah.
Yes. And we're talking about 90s. What I think was 94?
94, I think, is the release of the record. Super unknown.
So not that much time. Well, it's 30 years ago. It's a good while. But I think the situation that we're currently at, it started like 15 years ago. So I'd say...
It changed?
Yeah.
Yeah, because look, in the early 2000s, I was young enough, but old enough to remember some of it. And it was very different.
Yeah.
Because the early 2000s, compared to today, it was super close to the 90s still. In every regard. Stylistically speaking, well, after the huge thing that was the 2YK, that nobody wants to remember.
Yeah.
Because it was just that flop, the liquid everything and kind of chrome and everything with transparent plastic and stuff. That aesthetic is very unique to that. But right after the towers that we are not supposed to mention happened, the culture kind of went back a little bit back in time.
Yeah.
The whole thing with the whole 2YK is hysteria, and also the hopefulness of the mass adoption of the internet, and the connectivity aspect and blah blah blah, the kumbaya aspect of the end of history and stuff, the liberal world order taking place, and I'm gonna stop there. How many things were kind of poised already in a particular direction, and when that happens, we kind of went back a few years ago.
Yeah, a little bit.
A few years back, and during the early 2000s, something like this song would have been. It was a rarity, but it could have happened.
It still could. Yeah.
You got still. Chris Cornell was super popular back then. Not super popular, was popular enough, because Audioslave was huge.
But Audioslave is a lot more radio friendly.
It's way more radio friendly than anything by
Soundgarden. Yeah.
Even his solo career is slightly less conventional than than
Audioslave. Agreed.
Audioslave is clearly a rock radio friendly band. Probably the best radio friendly band ever, in my opinion.
Yeah, and let's do that.
Beside of Guns N' Roses, of course.
Yeah, but that disclaimer that shouldn't be needed, but it is.
It is.
To call something radio friendly is far from an offense. Okay, it's actually high praise.
Yeah,
to be able to write good music that is radio friendly, that's the mark of a great freaking artist.
Because if you manage to write something that is short enough for it to be compatible with radio standards, it's catchy enough for it to be compatible with marketing standards, and it still retain legitimacy and substance, you're doing something very good.
Yeah, that's
because
remarkable.
That's actually the challenge, because everybody can spend can write a 3-hour piece that goes nowhere, or be super indulgent and play a barrage of solo after solo that also goes nowhere. That's not artistry. Artistry is being able to communicate something through music, emotional speaking and intellectual speaking. And if you manage to do that at a shorter, more condensed, super straight to the point format, you are very good.
Yeah,
you're doing something very right.
Yes.
So what happened then? Or what were the conditions that allowed something like that to happen? Because I think that's a very starting point.
Yeah, let's try to understand what was going on in people's heads on the 90s. Okay, let's talk. We're talking mid 90s when the album came out.
Yes, so I'm wearing flannel.
Yeah.
Angsty, but kinda indifferent.
Kinda sloppy looking.
Sloppy looking. What else could we say?
We got a comment.
Hey Jeremiah, how is it going?
Hey, good to have you here.
Yes, we're talking about the 90s again.
No, but I don't know if you missed the very beginning of this conversation. We're talking about how up until perhaps mid 90s, music that was a little bit more unconventional, it still had a place in the mainstream, or in the radio, or in people's acceptance.
Yes.
And nowadays it's very, very hard to even visualize a band that's doing something slightly different cutting through.
Yes.
So that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, and we're actually trying to see first what were the conditions back then that allowed a song such as Black Hole Sun by Soundgarden to become popular. So yeah, I'm wearing flannel. I am indifferent to everything in life. I don't know if I'm Gen X or late millennial.
Yeah, I think more Gen X, because
I should be more Gen X.
On the most part, the millennials, at the release of Super Unknown, they were like small kids.
Yeah, but that would be the oldest.
Yeah, so probably not
toddlers.
necessarily putting a dent on the cultural side, guys.
Yes. So, could it be the indifference, man? Could it be the fact that people were kind of, I don't know, man, because when I think of the 90s, I'm trying to have a picture in my head of the cultural zeitgeist. I think of Office Space. I think of the Matrix. And yeah, Matrix is 99, yeah, but it's full on Gen X power fancy. Because of the corporate culture. Also how, economically speaking, most countries in the world, hashtag not all, had it better than we got right now. And yeah, so let me make sure that this doesn't blip.
Right, so they're gonna be looking at me from a very, very close perspective for that time being.
Back to that. Yeah.
No, the 90s were an interesting time when it comes to how people thought about things, because I can see the indifference, but I don't think it is the indifference the point, because the indifference actually grew quite a lot over the 2000s. Because I think now people are way more nihilistic than they were in the 90s, for instance.
Yeah, but look, the 90s, there was still some form of search for spirituality. That's why you saw a huge growth in the New Age stuff. Also Buddhism and all of that Zen stuff from the East. It started to become more popular in the West. And it was like the anti-stick it to the man attitude. In the 2000s, when millennials replaced in the Vox Populi these guys, the
Gen
Xers,
yeah,
it was more about how can I put it? It's like look at me, I'm a good person. Get me? Like sanctimonious, and that kind of. There's a word that I'm looking for, but I simply cannot remember. But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That entitlement of being better than the rest. And that's something that wasn't that present, at least from my perspective, as someone who is not a Gen Xer, in Gen X.
Yeah, but look, even the division that was done right now, I think it's a good showcase of one of the reasons why the whole thing about weird music being kicked to the curb happened. because it's in good part generational. Because while the Gen Xers were the ones dictating the flow of culture on the most part, 90s, let's say in the 90s, still you had things that, even though it was a little bit more indifferent, you still had a little bit of anger, still had a little bit of...
there was an edge.
There was an edge to it. When the millennials took over the Vox Populi, as you put it, Populi.
Yeah, Populi.
That is when things kind of turned into a softer route, and basically all edge was lost.
You know why? Because everything started to be kind of made for wider audiences. It gotta be appealing to everybody, because it became inclusive.